What happens when a convicted criminal serving a 35-year sentence in South Africa suddenly declares he wants to come home? Radovan Krejčíř, one of the most infamous figures in Czech criminal history, is making headlines once again. After more than a decade behind bars, he now claims the South African government no longer wants to pay for his security, opening the door for possible extradition. The notorious fugitive criminal Radovan Krejčíř, who has been confined for over a decade within the walls of a high-security South African prison, has broken his long silence to send a message that reverberates across borders. From behind the imposing bars of his cell, through layers of concrete and steel that have kept him separated from the world for so many years, he reaches out not just to the Czech authorities, but also to the shadowy figures of the Czech underworld that once regarded him as a powerful figure. His words carry both desperation and a calculated resolve, as he reveals a desire that has been slowly festering within him during his protracted incarceration. He wants to return to his homeland. After 11 years spent in confinement far from home, Krejčíř has spoken again, choosing to unveil his thoughts through an exclusive interview granted at the end of last year to the editorial team of extradition. His declaration is laced with a peculiar mix of resignation and quiet determination, as he acknowledges that his time in South Africa might be nearing its inevitable conclusion. As he reflects on his current predicament, Krejčíř points to the political changes that have unfolded in his host country. A new government has risen to power in South Africa, and according to him, this shift has brought about a distinct change in attitude toward his continued presence there. He claims that the authorities no longer want him, that he has become a burden rather than a case of interest. With a certain weariness, he expresses the belief that unless he formally files an appeal against his extradition, the decision to send him back to the Czech Republic will likely be carried out regardless of any official stance from the Czech side. In his words lies an acceptance of a fate that is slipping out of his control, yet also an underlying awareness that the intricate web of international legal processes might still offer unexpected turns. Krejčíř's reflections are punctuated by the staggering financial cost of his imprisonment, a detail he does not omit. South Africa, the nation that once served as his refuge when he fled there in 2007, has, over the years, invested vast sums into ensuring that he remains securely guarded. According to him, the amount spent on his security has reached an astronomical figure, 1.5 billion rand, which translates to nearly 2 billion Czech crowns. He speaks of this sum not merely as a dry statistic, but as evidence of the extent to which his case has weighed on South African resources. It is as if the financial toll itself has become a kind of unspoken argument for the authorities' growing reluctance to continue hosting him within their borders. Krejčíř notes, perhaps with a hint of sardonic irony, that even if other pending legal cases against him proceed, there is no possibility that he would receive a harsher sentence than the one he is already serving. In his mind, the die has been cast, the punishment already at its maximum, rendering further prosecution an exercise in futility from his perspective. The roots of Krejčíř's legal entanglement stretch back much further than his years in South Africa. The Czech Republic, his homeland, formally requested his extradition a full 15 years ago, driven by a desire to see him face justice for a series of crimes committed before his flight abroad. Among these is an 11-year prison sentence tied to charges of tax evasion involving a company based in Jalova, known as M5. This unresolved chapter of his criminal history continues to loom over any discussion of his return. Yet even as the years have passed, the path to bringing Krejčíř back to face Czech justice has remained obstructed by complex legal dilemmas. According to information obtained by extradition, the primary obstacle currently preventing his extradition lies in the thorny question of how the Czech legal system would reconcile his South African sentence with domestic sentencing standards. In the Czech Republic, the maximum permissible punishment stands at 20 years, with life imprisonment reserved for the gravest offenses. The challenge of harmonizing his 35-year South African sentence with Czech legal frameworks remains unresolved, casting a long shadow over the entire process. Thus, Krejčíř's message, broadcast from the austere confines of a South African prison cell, emerges as both a personal appeal and a revealing glimpse into the entangled world of international justice. His yearning to return home is not merely the desire of a man longing for familiar soil, but the strategic calculation of someone seeking to reposition himself within a different legal and political context. Behind his words lie the echoes of a life spent navigating between power and downfall, between wealth and imprisonment, between the lure of freedom and the iron grip of consequence. His plea stands as a testament to the enduring complexities of extradition, the high stakes of political will, and the unrelenting passage of time that even a man like Krejčíř cannot escape. In his voice, though filtered through the medium of an interview, one can almost hear the weight of the years pressing down, the flickering hope for a return, and the quiet acknowledgement that the gates of his captivity may soon open, whether as a step toward freedom or simply toward a different kind of confinement. Radovan Krejčíř remains a name that continues to resonate deeply within the Czech Republic, a symbol of both infamy and intrigue, a figure whose story refuses to fade into obscurity despite the passing of years. Even though he remains imprisoned in South Africa, confined behind the fortified walls of a high-security prison, whispers and reports suggest that his determination to return to his homeland has only grown stronger. This determination, according to recent information, might finally lead to his long-anticipated repatriation, a prospect that has stirred speculation and curiosity alike. The possibility of his return raises pressing questions about the fate of those closest to him, particularly his wife Katarina and his son Denis, who were once accustomed to a life of luxury but have since been forced to navigate the aftermath of losing their opulent villa in Černice, a property that once stood as a testament to their wealth and status. It was investigative journalist Jiří Hynek who, through his platform Odkryto, unveiled fresh insights into Krejčíř's intentions. In an interview conducted towards the end of the previous year, Hynek spoke with Krejčíř, who conveyed a sense of both resignation and defiance. Krejčíř explained that a political shift in South Africa had altered the landscape for him. A new government had taken power, and with it came a distinct unwillingness to continue harboring a man whose notoriety had become a burden. He expressed a conviction that if he did not actively oppose the extradition process, the decision to send him back to the Czech Republic would proceed regardless of Czech approval or objection. Beneath his words lay an acknowledgement that the tides were turning, that his presence in South Africa was no longer politically or economically palatable. As Krejčíř recounted the astronomical cost of his incarceration to the South African authorities, the magnitude of the figures he cited was staggering. He claimed that the government had already spent an immense sum on maintaining his imprisonment, a figure amounting to R1.5 billion, which translated into nearly 2 billion Czech crowns. He suggested that continuing to keep him locked away under such costly security measures was an expense that South Africa was no longer willing to shoulder. In his view, even if additional legal proceedings were initiated against him, the possibility of a harsher sentence than the 35 years he had already received was non-existent, rendering further prosecution redundant. His statements painted a portrait of a man caught between the weight of past transgressions and the diminishing patience of a nation that once offered him refuge. Amid these revelations, attention naturally turned to his family, particularly his wife Katarina, whose life had undergone dramatic upheavals since her husband's incarceration. Once residing in the Grand Villa in Černice, she had waged a determined and relentless battle to retain ownership of the property after it became subject to foreclosure proceedings. That villa, once a beacon of their affluence, had been seized by the authorities and earmarked for auction. Katarina did everything within her power to halt the sale, presenting the court with claims that the villa belonged solely to her, purchased with funds allegedly provided by Radovan's father. Yet the court found her narrative unconvincing, and despite her fervent legal maneuvers, the property languished unsold, its grandeur slowly succumbing to decay and neglect. In 2017, the villa was thrust back into the public eye when a group of YouTubers from TV Twix broke in, documenting the eerie desolation within its walls. That same night, photographers captured images of Katarina arriving under the cover of darkness to assess the damage firsthand, a haunting image of a woman confronting the crumbling remnants of a once lavish life. Her struggle to preserve the villa did not end there. In a bold, if desperate, strategic shift, Katarina attempted in 2021 to transfer ownership of the property to the state itself. However, her efforts were swiftly thwarted when it was revealed that she had attempted this transaction during a period in which she was legally prohibited from disposing of the asset. The spokesperson for the Chamber of Executors, Lenka Desitova, explained that the request to register the ownership transfer had been rejected precisely because of these legal restrictions. Despite numerous appeals and objections lodged in an attempt to delay or prevent the final sale, the executors ultimately succeeded. The villa was sold for a sum of 21.38 million Czech crowns to Petra Kusarova. who not only acquired the sprawling Cernesis estate from which Krejčíř himself had once fled, but also purchased a smaller villa owned by Krejčíř on Karlstedtska Street in the same town. With these transactions, Katarina irrevocably lost her claim to the most significant properties the family had owned within the Czech Republic. Yet the loss of these villas did not signify the complete erasure of the Krejčíř family's foothold in the country. In 2017, Denis, the son of Radovan and Katarina, made a significant acquisition of his own, purchasing a sizable villa in the Prague district of Hostovar for 16 million crowns. This residence, covering an interior area slightly exceeding 220 square meters, featured a spacious basement complete with a garage large enough to accommodate 2 vehicles, along with 2 full residential floors. Official records indicated that the Krejčíř family owned only half of the property, while the remaining share belonged to Petr and Zini Gremlica. Petr Gremlica, notably, had once been an associate of Radovan Krejčíř during their time at the company Koromex, suggesting enduring ties between the family and individuals connected to their earlier business dealings. This villa in Hostovar, therefore, emerged as the new nucleus of the Krejčíř family's presence in the Czech Republic, a far cry from the grandeur of Cernesis but still emblematic of their lingering influence. Beyond the confines of this residence, little is publicly known about the current business endeavors of either Katarina or Denis. Officially, no records point to active enterprises under their names, leaving their financial activities shrouded in speculation. However, the story takes a different turn when considering Radovan's mother, Nadezhda. She continues to helm Desinska Tiskarna, a well-established printing company that has remained under her stewardship since 2003, following the passing of her husband Lambert Krejčíř. The company's website proudly notes her leadership, affirming that she retains ownership to this day. Thanks to this long-standing and reputable business, it appears that the Krejčíř family still enjoys a source of stable income, one sufficient to sustain a life of relative comfort despite the turbulence and legal battles that have surrounded them for years. Through the shifting fortunes of property, power, and family ties, the narrative of Radovan Krejčíř and those closest to him continues to weave a complex tapestry of ambition, downfall, and resilience against the backdrop of a world that has never quite let them slip from its gaze.